And hello, everyone, and welcome back to my candidate series. Today, we have a candidate for the United States Senate, Dakarai Larriett, who is running for the Democratic nomination in the state of Alabama. Mr. Larriett is a proud graduate of the University of Alabama, spent some time in New York City in business, and is now back in Alabama running for the United States Senate. Hello, Dakarai.
Hello, Jake. How's it going?
Good. So I want to ask you what I ask every candidate first. Tell us a little about your background and why you decided to run.
Yes, so born and raised Alabamian. I love this state. I want to see the state do better. And as you mentioned, I graduated from University of Alabama, built a career in New York because I couldn't find a job here in state, and was blessed with the opportunity to come home to Alabama in the pandemic with the whole remote work craze, and just fell in love with the state again. And I saw so many opportunities to address systemic issues in the state, and namely in healthcare, education, and economic opportunity, and decided to stay after getting very involved in the community, volunteering. I was elected to my homeowners association board and quickly became president. And with all of that experience, I am seeking now the nomination for United States Senate.
Talking about healthcare, the state is facing obviously issues with rural hospital closures. How much of an impact do we believe the Medicaid and Medicare cuts from the big beautiful bill, which is really the big bad bill
Right.
that the Republicans passed last summer, is going to have on Alabama?
It's going to be a very vicious spiral. So the estimate that I heard is this is going to create a shortfall of about $300 million dollars in our annual budget, and that's significant for the state of Alabama. And that is driven by the fact that the subsidies change with this new math that takes place somewhere around 2027. Um, and with that, the cost sharing is higher for us, and we're going to have to cut back. And what does that look like? It looks like the trend we've seen. So more hospitals shutting down, um, access for all of us being reduced. In fact, when I moved back to Alabama, I tried to get just my annual checkup from my doctor, and I was told that the wait was about 8 months. That was COVID time. So imagine with all the hospitals that have shut down since then, plus what's happening as a result of the big billionaire bill.
One of the things that I've often began to notice getting involved in politics is sometimes the issues that those of us who are really involved in the process believe are a big issue doesn't always trickle down to the voters. What are voters telling you is their biggest concern?
Mm. Well, that was really important to me, especially as, someone who had moved back in the last 5 years. I wanted to make sure that I was truly attuned to what the issues were. So I did a poll, and the first issue that came out, and again, this is more progressive voters, was protect our democracy. But after that, it truly was kitchen table issues, and it was number one, education, number two, healthcare, and number three, economic opportunity. And that's what we built our campaign on. Because when I launched my campaign, I said, we need leaders who listen. And that's what the voters want.
What is something that you see that's emerging as a big issue that's not getting a lot of attention at the moment that's going to be a big issue for us 5 to 10 years down the road?
Mm. Well, it's funny when the campaign started, I spoke out obviously about criminal justice reform as a result of my own personal experience with false arrest when I was traveling up to Michigan in 2024. And my team said, hey, that's not a winning issue. You can't take that to the general election. And then fast forward 6, 7 months, the Alabama solution has come out. It's been nominated for an Academy Award. I think it's going to win. And actually, one of the researchers just spoke at my Democratic club. So this is becoming mainstream. Whereas when I knew about the documentary, it was still being developed. And I went to the Alabama State House and spoke out against the conditions in our prison system. And I think the connection to the general public is what's happening doesn't make us safer. It costs us a lot of money defending wayward corrections officers. And finally, it hurts our pocketbooks. So we pay $60,000, $100,000 a year to house people. Then we compete with these people for jobs at places like Hyundai, where, they're paying them sub minimum wage labor and suppressing wages within the state. So the issues really come full circle, and I think it's just going to continue to become more prevalent.
That's one of the things that really shocked me about the Alabama solution is that the state of Alabama considers these people safe enough to let them go work for Hyundai, go make Happy Meals for McDonald's, and a host of other corporate welfare essentially, but they're not safe enough to release to our streets. Um, and I mean, you will be at the federal level, it won't trickle down. But watching that film was very shocking. I knew the situation in Alabama prisons was horrendous. I did not realize the extent how deep the rot went. Um, Another thing that has occurred since you've launched your campaign has been the assault from ICE and Trump's deportation agenda. Have voters spoken to you? I know Alabama's a conservative state, and you're running for the Democratic nomination, but I have to believe there are conservatives and Republicans out there that are troubled by what they've seen, especially the shooting of Mr. Petty, who was exercising his Second Amendment rights.
Right. Right. Yeah, I've seen some polls around that. It has certainly come up in Democratic meet and greets over the last couple of months, and it's just creating great outrage. And I think it's a real opportunity for us to talk about our values and our basic rights, our Bill of Rights. When you think about freedom of speech, um, freedom to carry a firearm, all of these are under attack. And I think the wider population is seeing that now with this administration.
Talking about um, firearms and his exercising his Second Amendment right, there was a few days there where it seemed like the conservatives were saying, oh, guns are horrible and bad and should have no place in society. And liberals were embracing the Second Amendment. And I was like, have we fallen down the rabbit hole here?
Yeah, that's what's so troubling about the time that we live in right now. It seems like people are willing to completely throw away their morals and principles based upon who's in the White House and what they're saying that day. And I was really proud of progressives that stood their ground and said, this is about the law. And he was not reaching for that gun. He was not putting the officers in danger. And he was lawfully carrying it. So that was the law at the moment, and there was no reason to escalate.
Um, Speaking more broadly on the topic of criminal justice and criminal justice reform, one of the things I believe officers sometimes act with impunity is because of qualified immunity. What are your plans to address that in the Senate and maybe make officers more accountable to the public so we don't see outrages like we saw not only in Minnesota, but in your case in Michigan, where you
Yeah.
were unlawfully detained and treated horribly?
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, in my matter, I was falsely arrested, accused of drug trafficking, driver's license confiscated, and ultimately got the body and dash cam from the night and realized the troopers were actually trying to plant drugs on my vehicle. And my case was initially dismissed in the lower court due to qualified immunity. So what happened is they truncated and edited the body and dash cam, shared that with the judge, and the judge used that as if it were evidence. And so that's what I'm trying to fix. So I authored what I call the Motorist Bill of Rights, and it is a very simple proposal that improves transparency. If you listen to the congressional testimony today, a minority of ICE agents even have body cam on right now, which is shocking given all of the egregious behavior. So that seems intentional. I want to make sure that all law enforcement are wearing body and dash cam, that their interactions are lawful, and we agree upon what that looks like federally. So if I'm in Michigan or Georgia or Mississippi, I know what is a lawful reason to stop me and what a lawful test if they determine that, for example, a sobriety test is needed. And then finally, and most importantly, the evidence, the body and dash cam, should be uploaded to a neutral third-party cloud in real time where defense attorneys, public defenders can access that and hold law enforcement accountable. And we've got to get rid of qualified immunity. I'm very concerned about the Back the Blue law that is coming federally. It's been resuscitated from 2023, and Katie Britt and Tommy Tuberville are co-sponsors of that bill. And it's going to be like another HB 202, which we saw here in Alabama, which basically takes all the protections away from the public and gives them to law enforcement.
Um, Speaking of Katie Britt, if elected to the Senate, you would be serving with Katie Britt for at minimum 2 years. What is your plan to work across the aisle with Senator Britt to accomplish wins for the state of Alabama?
Yeah. So I always give the example of my 20 years in corporate America and in leading nonprofits. I never walked to a room and asked someone what their political affiliation was before I started working with them. It's all about the end goal, and the end goal is making Alabama better. So that's always going to be my goal. And I've spent a lot of time in Washington. I went up to Washington 4 times in the last year. And one statistic stuck with me: the vast majority of bills are bipartisan. We just don't hear about them because that doesn't make the news. It's the very controversial ones that make the news. And the Alabama delegation agrees on a lot of things to move forward Alabama. So I've already stopped by Britt's office, and I want to build that relationship so that we can get the very best for Alabama.
That's good to hear. You are much more caring and understanding than I am. I'm much more of a partisan, uh, down in the dirt type. Katie Britt often disappoints me, not just as a Democrat, but because I believe she knows better than a lot of the time what she is doing. So you have a much more heart of gold than I do. Um, One thing that this campaign is doing is it has several Democrats running. And essentially, there are three, in my opinion, top Democrats.
Okay.
There's Kyle, there's yourself, and there's Mark Wheeler. I believe there's a few other candidates who are running. I do not know as much about them, but in my opinion, it's a three-man race. Why should voters in the primary back you over your opponents?
For me, it's about the lived experience and the work that I bring to the role. And when you see my opponents on stage, it's going to be a lot of, I'm going to fight, I'm going to do this. And I want you to look at my resume. So, my 20-year resume in public service. So, I started out initially in addressing homelessness issues in the Bronx. When I moved to New York City, joined the board of the Bronx Community Pride Center, advocating for LGBT unhoused youth. From there, I went into harm reduction, public health, addressing the opioid crisis. I rose to being a leader at the National Harm Reduction Coalition. So that is the leading capacity building organization that helps communities and individuals impacted by drug addiction. From there, I moved back to Alabama and I joined the board of the University of Alabama Alumni Association. So ensuring that everyone has cost-effective, quality education. I started driving for Meals on Wheels. As I mentioned before, joined the board my homeowners association, which is a 60 unit development, a major development in downtown Birmingham of commercial and residential properties, and quickly rose up to being president of that, which has required me to work with the city, to work with our mayor, to work with our city council president to get things done. So I have 20 years of experience in actually getting things done in public service as well as in the private world, where I was an executive at Whirlpool, at L'Oreal, LVMH, and built my own company from the ground up.
Speaking of the Pride Collective that you worked for in the Bronx, you are an openly gay man running for the United States Senate in Alabama. Has that presented any unique challenges to your run, and what have been voters' reactions to learning about that aspect of your life?
Well, I think overall it's been a very positive experience, and it's certainly not something I'm running on, but it's one of a thousand interesting things about me. And I always take the opportunity to share that Alabama has been a uh, jumping point of civil rights across, our country for years and years and years. And I'm so proud that my state House Representative Neil Rafferty is an openly gay man. We have LGBT folks in all levels of government in Alabama. So I think what Alabamans really care about is getting the work done for them. And that's what I'm committed to doing.
That is great to hear. And I'm also always I believe Alabama is better than its worst critics often say. Alabama
Absolutely.
is a welcoming state. We are a resilient state, and people really care about the results more than anything in this state.
Absolutely.
One of the things that you talked about also was education, and I believe your parents or both of your parents were in education. Um, could you tell us about your plans for education?
Yeah, so my mom is a public school teacher, and she's been teaching my pretty much my whole life. And in fact, I'll be volunteering at her school in the next couple of weeks. Um, it's very important to me. So I grew up in Birmingham. I would have been zoned to failing schools, but my mom advocated for me. She got me into magnet schools, charter schools. I graduated from Alabama School of Fine Arts, then went on to University of Alabama. Actually went to WJ Christian Middle School, which is a magnet school for gifted youth. And those are the opportunities that made me who I am today. I want to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to excel and gets a quality education. I've seen it happen in Alabama, but the problem is it seems very isolated to very specific institutions. So if you are in Mountain Brook, if you're at one of our amazing charter schools like Ask Miss or the aeronautics school up in Huntsville, you're going to do great. But that is not the same story in inner city Birmingham or Montgomery or Mobile. So that's what I'm committed to doing. Um, from a federal lens, it's about reestablishing the Department of Education. I mean, hello, creating those standards and then using the bully pulpit to ensure that we stop stealing from the Education Trust Fund to build mega prisons. And that is going to require some difficult discussions around, for example, property taxes. Do we need to reassess our income so that we can support our children? What about alternative forms of income, including the lottery? And that's something that the governor would certainly need to push.
Yes, that is all great points. And like he said, the difference in educational outcomes for people in Mountain Brook and inner city Birmingham are far different. And those are my listeners who are outside of Alabama, because I have a large amount of listeners in the state of Maryland,
Mm.
is the same city.
Oh,
There,
yes.
it Mountain Brook
Other
is a
side of a mountain, like
yeah,
literally
yeah,
the back side and the front side of a mountain. That's the
yeah.
difference.
Yes, and the educational outcomes in those two locations in the same city in the same county are vastly different. And it's a crime that our state legislature allows that to occur.
Yeah.
Those children deserve the same opportunity. It's the same thing in Huntsville. A student getting an education in the city of Huntsville schools is vastly different than a student going to a magnet school in Huntsville. Huntsville has some of the most affluent areas of the state, and then there are areas inside of Huntsville that are deeply, deeply struggling.
Mm.
Um,
It's just so deeply unfair, and I every day I'm so appreciative of the opportunity I was given. But in a sense, what I experienced was unfair too. I think about the fact that my parents had the ability to drive me outside of the district. That is a limitation for many people. Public transportation is a huge limitation in the city of Birmingham and in our county. So, how do we level the playing field? That's what this campaign is about. It's giving everyone that fair chance to be whatever they want to be.
and another thing you talked about was your parents advocating for you. I had learning difficulties growing up, but I had a mother who went and advocated for me to get the services that I needed. Not everyone is that lucky. Not everyone has a parent willing to go and fight for their child and students. And I want to see more Alabama schools and more schools federally put in the hard work to advocate for those students who may not have a fighter in their corner to get them the resources to achieve what they need. Um,
Absolutely.
the real work of Congress occurs in the committee setting. What committees would you want to serve on in the Senate, and what would be your goals on those committees?
Well, again, it starts from the needs of the state. And when I think about what matters here, agriculture, we're an agricultural state, and that touches me very personally as my family's originally from Prattville, Alabama. So we still farm, we still have cattle. Uh, then I would say armed services. Again, I grew up in an Army family. It's so important that we protect our veterans and the sacrifices they make for us. And it's so deeply intertwined with all the activities up in North Alabama and the Arsenal. And then finally, I would just say um, intelligence, just because I always want to know about what's happening before it happens.
That
And my
that
first
is
question will be, tell me about the aliens.
yes, yes, that would be mine too. Don't I believe Oswald did it. I believe James Earl Ray did it. I don't need to see those files. Uh, Now, if they've got Kennedy's head preserved in some kind of cryogenically frozen lab, yeah, we'll see that. But I want to see the aliens.
Yeah,
I want to know what happened in New Mexico in the 40s.
right.
Uh, but you mentioned armed services and Huntsville and the arsenal, which is so important to the state, and of course the Agriculture Committee, which is a huge industry in Alabama. It's probably second only to tourism
Mm.
in the state as the number one industry for the state. Um, what has been something out on the campaign trail that has inspired you? uh, Going out and meeting voters.
Mm. What the enthusiasm around this year. It's really building. I would say just last night I was in Aniana, and this crowd is just the energy was palpable. The group only formed, I want to say, in the last 6 months. So, like, people are hungry, and hearing and seeing folks who say, "Hey, I'm a Republican," or "I typically vote Republican, but something's off with the party right now, and I want to see what's happening here." So that's been really inspiring.
Blount County, Alabama, up there
Yeah.
in Oneonta, I do believe over, you mentioned they formed recently. I believe when they formed last summer, they got the Alabama Democratic Party to 67 county parties. I believe they were the
Okay.
got us across the finish line, and we have an active party in every county now. And for my listeners outside of the state, that might not seem like a big accomplishment. But I want to remind those listeners there's a county in Alabama named Winston County that gave Donald Trump 90% of the vote. So having, and there's counties that gave him 80 and 70%. So having a active Democratic Party present in those counties is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Um, on the flip side of that, what's been one thing that's frustrated you out on the campaign trail, or maybe not frustrated you, but been an eye opener?
Mm. Well, I think we have a lot of work to do around the civics process and helping people to understand it. I still recall those very basic lessons that I learned in high school, but I think the Republicans are playing a long game about removing the Department of Education and dumbing down America. So people don't get how it works. They don't get the importance of their vote. They don't know where to get information. So what I've learned campaigning, call time, which is when we call for donations, things like that, before you even get a chance to introduce yourself, you're doing some very basic civics education. Like there's a primary. How do I vote? Where do I vote? So the funnel is like this wide before you can even talk about yourself and your issues. So we need more work and leadership from the party to do that for us, to drive get out the vote in education. And I think our government should be doing that, frankly. I don't even think that's a partisan issue.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. Um, I think most of my listeners are pretty engaged people and understand the process. But I was listening to a show recently with a journalist, and he was talking about his teenage daughter voting for the first time, and she didn't realize that there was a primary and then there was a general election. She thought she voted in the primary and that was it because she was excited about Bernie Sanders. And he had to explain to her that, there's two elections. And, this is the daughter of a journalist who's a political journalist. So I think sometimes those of us who are engaged need to take a step back and realize not everyone is as informed and engaged as we are. Like, there is going to be a primary in the state of Alabama on May 19th. And if no candidate in each race receives 50%, there's going to be a runoff in June. I believe it's June 16th is the runoff. And then in November, we have the general election. So we've got to make sure that we explain to voters when voting occurs and how to do it. Like in Alabama, polls are open on election day from 7 to 7, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And if you're working, your employer has to give you 2 hours to go vote. 2 hours. Now, you have to
Hmm.
let them know that you want to exercise your right, but they have to give you 2 hours. And also, even though Alabama has restrictive laws around absentee voting, if you're going to be out of the county on election day, you can vote absentee. Just go down to your local courthouse, go to the clerk's office, and they can walk you through the process during the absentee period. Um, and I'm so glad you mentioned that because our current United States Senator did not know the three branches of the federal government. Um, he said that there was the president, which that's the wrong word for it. It's executive, but nice, good effort. Then he said the House, that's part of one. And then he said the Senate. Um, that one is actually with the House, it's the legislative branch. And then that third branch is the judicial branch. And speaking of that third branch, this is an area where I feel that Republicans have done great damage. They have played, like you were talking about with dumbing down the electric, they have played the long game with the judiciary. During Bill Clinton's presidency, they let nominations languish in the Senate. So George W. Bush, during his first term, after the Supreme Court appointed George W. Bush to the presidency, uh,
Yes.
allowed him to fill a ton of judicial nominations. During the presidency of Barack Obama, they held open a Supreme Court vacancy for an entire year, and numerous appeals court judges and district court judges that Obama had nominees for once they took control of the Senate in 2015. If you're a member of the Senate and the Democrats have control, can we get a commitment or at least a promise to help prevent Donald Trump from stacking the judiciary by voting against uh, nominees? And if there's nominees from Alabama that Katie Britt submits, not returning your blue slip.
Mhm. I commit to, like I've done in 20 years of corporate America, judging the applicant for their qualifications. And I have seen a number of unqualified applicants be submitted by this president, from Robert F. Kennedy to Brett Kavanaugh. And it's been really devastating for our democracy. And gosh, even the justice down in Florida that stopped the documents case. So this is what happens. And those are big national stories, but personally, it's how a very clear case of discrimination and wrongdoing by the police gets thrown out. You have these activist judges that are appointed by extreme Republicans. So my commitment is making sure only qualified people get my vote. And then really strategically, we've got to win big. We've got to win big so that we can control both houses and set the agenda and stop the madness that's happening in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Um, let's say that Democrats win both houses of Congress next year, which I certainly believe is possible. And if you're elected to the Senate, there's no question that the Senate has flipped because that has been a huge national swing
Yeah, yeah.
and it has reached our great state. What is one thing that you think Democrats that would be in control of Congress could work with President Trump to achieve to be a big positive win for the American people?
Well, the first piece is healthcare, ensuring that it is cost effective. So this administration has definitely taken steps with regard to prescriptions, and I think that's a great place that we can lean in on, making sure that they're affordable. And we talked about the subsidies. At the very least, I think that we can agree to fund subsidies for the near term and then ideate longer term solutions to get affordable health care accessible to everybody. So that would be one of my key areas that we would be able to work with this administration on.
And that's an issue I really do think that if Trump was forced to work with a Republican, not a Republican, a Democratic majority in both houses, that you could get a compromise on. And another one that I don't think enough Democrats are talking about is raising the minimum wage. I
Yes,
think that if Democrats controlled both houses of Congress,
yeah,
that you could get Trump on board with a slight increase in the
I
federal
agree.
minimum
It's
wage.
time. Yeah.
Um, Dakari, where can voters find out more about your campaign, donate, volunteer, and where are you going to be in the next few weeks?
Yeah, well, check us out at DakariLarriett.com, and then on social media, it'll be Dakari Larriett for Senate. So we are looking for volunteers. Just click Get Involved, and we are starting phone banking next week. So going to be really exciting to start speaking to the rest of the state We have we estimate 350,000 calls to make for the primary, so we need your help. And of course, donations allow us to get our word out. So if you're driving up and down the state, you should start seeing our billboards now in most of the major metro areas. So that's really exciting, as well as online, and we'll be on streaming services very soon. So that takes a lot of money. So we appreciate any support you can offer us. And I'm everywhere. So each week, I am crisscrossing the state. I will be in Huntsville tomorrow for a television interview at CBS 19, and I will be in Mobile for Mardi Gras over the weekend, back to Jefferson County, and I will keep my calendar updated on social media.
And we thank you for coming on. And I just want to note for people that they may think of Louisiana and New Orleans as the birthplace of Mardi Gras in the United States. No, 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 my friend. That is the great state of Alabama. And
But original.
Mardi Gras is an official state holiday in Baldwin County, Alabama, and I believe in Mobile County. I believe it's in two counties in the state. Dakari, we thank you for coming on today.
Thank you,
And we
Jay.
thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with us. And we know that's a long haul from Huntsville to Mobile. That's about a 6 hour drive.
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
lot. It's a big
yes.
state.
All right. Well, thank you
Thank you
for,
so much, Jake. I appreciate it.
yes.